Hello, my name's Dr. Sohom Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist in London. I assess mentally disordered offenders. I also work as an expert witness, so I give evidence in criminal trials all across the UK. CrimeCon is coming to the UK. It will be full of experts such as myself and also law enforcement agents. There'll also be your favourite YouTubers and podcast makers. So I really hope to see you there.
In the United States, violent extremists embark on a campaign of terror nearly 2 decades before the Oklahoma City bombing. Bank robberies, bombings, escalating acts of destruction. When their agenda turns to murder, FBI counterterrorism experts team up with state police to stop a group of violent radicals before they strike again.
In the 1970s, a string of bank robberies and bombings spread fear and destruction along the East Coast. The FBI faced a new breed of criminal, the domestic terrorists. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. For nearly a decade, these self-proclaimed revolutionaries operate underground. Law enforcement vowed to unearth them once and for all.
Interstate 80 is an isolated stretch of highway in northern New Jersey. On December 21st, 1981, Trooper Phillip Lamanco of the New Jersey State Police makes a routine traffic stop. The driver seems nervous. Lamonica sees that he has a gun.
Put your hands up on the steering wheel! Put your license up on the dash! Step out of the vehicle now! Keep your hands up! Back up against the car now! Stay there! Don't move, just stay there! Got any more weapons on you? Stay there! Don't you move! Yes, sir, stay in the car! Stay in the car, sir! Stay in the car! Stay in the car, sir!
A passing motorist spots the empty police cruiser and stops. He checks to make sure everything is all right. In the snow, he sees the road trooper, bleeding and motionless. He uses the police radio to call for help.
State Trooper Barracks, go ahead.
I'm here on I-80. I'm at a patrol car.
What's your name, sir?
Troopers on duty at the Blairstown State Police Barracks are surprised to hear a civilian voice on their radio.
Trooper's on the ground. He's motionless. I think it's a shot. Not moving at all.
Stay in the car, sir. We're on the way.
All available troopers respond to the report of the shooting.
We have an officer shot. Officer down.
Charles Coe is a major with the New Jersey State Police.
Virtually every road trooper that was on duty that day responded to the scene. We're all basically road troopers to start with. That's where we started from. We all knew the dangers involved, and of course you never think it's going to happen to you, and you really don't think it's going to happen to someone like a Phil Lamonica.
Lamonico is a legend in the department. Arriving at the scene, Lieutenant Richard Ryan can't believe he's been shot.
Initial shot struck Phil in his chest area. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, but the impact of the shots kind of turned him a little, and one of the shots went in under his armpit and went directly into his heart and basically killed him, that one shot.
Investigators find Lamonico's service revolver empty. All 6 rounds fired, indicating the trooper had gone down fighting. Lieutenant John Mendres processes the crime scene, finding further evidence of the gun battle.
I obtained pieces of glass fragments, 12 9mm bullet casings at the scene. They were in the snowbank and in the general area.
From the size and number of bullet casings, Mendres believes the murder weapon is a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. He searches for the gun, but it is nowhere to be found. EMTs transfer Phillip Lamanco's body to the hospital as 250 police officers go after his killer. New Jersey and Pennsylvania state police stop and question motorists. One man remembers seeing two men as they left the scene. They were driving a 1977 Chevy Nova with Connecticut license plates. Police set up checkpoints along the Delaware River. Officers search miles of highway and back roads looking for the killers.
The response was overwhelming. People were coming out of the woodwork to help us and offer leads and try to help us find the car, find the people responsible for this.
Hours later, a narcotics detective and a state trooper find the Nova. The car has been abandoned on a rural road 3 miles from the crime scene. Detectives find an empty holster. Troopers search the vehicle for clues. They find several bullet holes in the car's exterior.
It was a shot pattern into the hood of the car, into the windshield, and the right front passenger window was shot out, which indicates that he was shooting at the passenger.
Investigators suspect it was likely the passenger of the car who murdered Phil Lamanco. The driver was in such a hurry to ditch the vehicle, he left behind a crucial piece of evidence.
On the dashboard in plain sight was a Connecticut driver's license in the name of Barry Eastbury.
For now, Eastbury's name and address are investigators' only link to Lamonico's killer.
And I actually left that scene with another trooper and immediately drove to Connecticut to follow up that lead that night. And we proceeded to the address that was in downtown New Haven, Connecticut.
The address on the Eastbury driver's license turns out to be a hotel rather than a residence.
So it was turning out to be a dead-end lead. We met with the FBI later in the morning, and they told us that they had been at that same hotel a few months earlier following a lead up on an individual by the name of Raymond Levasseur.
Levasseur is one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. Agents believe he is the leader of a violent radical group called the Sam Melville Jonathan Jackson Unit. The FBI suspects the group of masterminding a series of bank robberies and bombings. Now investigators wonder whether the group is also responsible for the murder of Trooper Phil Lamanco.
I'd like to take those prints and see if we can match them up.
Agents send Levasseur's file to the state lab in New Jersey to compare his fingerprints with those found in the Nova.
Unfortunately, none of them matched, which we could not believe. It just didn't make any sense.
Ryan takes a closer look at Levasseur's wanted flyer.
I reread the flyer, and on the bottom in small print, right at the last line, it said, "May be accompanied by Thomas William Manning."
FBI agents pull Manning's file. The photo on his wanted poster is the man they know as Barry Eastbury. Examiners match Manning's file fingerprints to those lifted from the Nova, confirming that Barry Eastbury is an alias for Thomas Manning. If Manning is involved in the murder of Phillip Lamanco, investigators are up against a dangerous fugitive. According to FBI files, Manning met Levasseur in prison, where they both served time on drugs, weapons, and robbery charges.
He's been involved in several bank robberies.
The two men formed a radical group called the Melville Jackson Unit, according to Special Agent Leonard Cross.
They were well versed
in a lot of guerrilla tactics. They studied guerrilla manuals. They studied a lot of the radical left literature from the late 60s, the mid-60s, and the early 70s.
The group began a reign of terror, claiming responsibility for 7 bombings in Massachusetts and New York between 1976 and 1979, including the bombing of 2 courthouses, the Middlesex County Courthouse in Lowell, Massachusetts, and the Suffolk County Courthouse in Boston, where 20 people were injured. According to their propaganda, the Melville-Jackson unit targets institutions and businesses to protest government and corporate policies they believe are unfair. FBI Special Agent Ed Peterson is investigating the radical group.
I think they viewed themselves as some champion of the downtrodden, the poor. Actually, they never did anything for the poor, and, all they were committed to were acts of violence.
Agents believe the group funds its violent political agenda with bank robberies, carefully planned operations that are executed with military precision.
It was obvious that these people were not your everyday criminals. They were an organized criminal group who were traveling the New England states and committing numerous crimes, the most serious, obviously, the murder of Trooper Lamonica.
On Christmas Eve, 1981, 2,000 law enforcement officers from several states attend the funeral of Trooper Lamonico. The wave of support overwhelms his wife, Donna.
I was just amazed that all the way up, it was a good half mile from the church, cars had started to park to come to the funeral.
Phil Lamanco was one of the most respected troopers in the state of New Jersey.
He was a great trooper. He really, really was. And I think one of the main things that made him a great trooper was he really, really loved and respected his job. He was one of the good ones.
He was the idol of a lot of young troopers. He had trained a lot of young troopers in the tactics of stopping cars and looking for contraband in vehicles on the highway.
Superintendent Clinton Pagano makes Donna Lamonico a solemn promise. The New Jersey State Police will do everything in their power to bring her husband's killers to justice.
I just could see in his eyes the sincerity, and I just knew he would make sure. That from that point is where I grew confidence in knowing they're going to get caught. Whoever they are, they're going to be found and they're going to get caught, because he promised me.
At a nearby municipal building, New Jersey and Pennsylvania State Police work closely with the FBI to find the men who murdered Trooper Lamonico. The task force follows up on dozens of leads. Firearms investigators ask gun shop owners in the area if anyone has sold 9mm ammunition to a man named Barry Eastbury.
They got a hit in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, which is right across the river from the shooting.
3 months earlier, a Barry Easterly, not Eastbury, had purchased 9mm ammunition at a gun shop in Stroudsburg. The name seems too close to be a coincidence. If these were the bullets used in the killing, the 3-month time span is an important clue.
We felt that these people resided in this general area. They weren't just passing through. We were working very closely with the Pennsylvania State Police at that time. We notified them about this find.
Pennsylvania State Police.
2 days later, the Pennsylvania State Police receive an unusual phone call.
They left their dog?
A local landlord calls with a complaint.
The Pennsylvania State Police was notified by a fellow by the name of Charles Miller, who lived in Marshall's Creek, Pennsylvania, directly across the river in the greater Stroudsburg area.
Miller owns several rental properties in the area. A dog has been abandoned inside one of his houses. He's not seen the tenants for nearly 2 weeks. According to Miller, the house was rented by a man named Barry Easterly. SWAT teams converge on the rented farmhouse.
Get out! Get out! Get out!
searched the house from room to room. Whoever lived there left in a hurry. The occupants of the house had abandoned clothing, personal photos, and even their dog. In one room, police find radical literature and a sketch featuring an AK-47 assault rifle. In the bedroom, they find the tools of domestic terrorists.
The map again.
We found all types of paraphernalia, information on how to make bombs, bomb-making material.
Police also find 9mm bullets, the same caliber that killed Trooper Phil Lamanco. They believe the rented property is a safe house, where Thomas Manning, his wife and children, lived at the time of the Lamonico shooting.
Everything in this trunk, we've got bomb-making materials.
Investigators find documents that offer fresh insight into the radical group's operations.
Especially this right here.
They apparently were planning to pull a bank robbery in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
That's good.
We had those schematics. We also found a critique of the bank robbery where several policemen were killed a few years before that. And all of these things they had to leave behind because they left in such haste.
In another bedroom, Sergeant Tom Evans finds a small phone book.
We began to write down all the phone numbers were in that book. There were no names, there were nicknames, and there was no area code.
Police also find a photograph of a man they can't identify.
Do you know who that is? Who's this?
According to the landlord, the man in the picture lived in the Mannings' guest room. The family referred to him as Uncle David. Investigators wonder if Uncle David was Manning's passenger the night of the shooting, and whether he is responsible for the murder of Trooper Phillip Lamanco. The search for a cop killer evolves into a manhunt for a group of domestic terrorists. A raid on an abandoned Pennsylvania farmhouse yields two important clues: a mysterious photograph and a book of telephone numbers. Dozens of phone numbers are listed. Sergeant Evans of the New Jersey State Police notes that none of them have area codes.
Trooper said to me, "Those look like Boston phone exchanges." Next morning, we went to Boston and we started to run down the phone numbers to see who we could come up with. There were at least 100 phone numbers in there. One of them had a little note on it that said rent.
How you doing, sir?
The telephone number belongs to a company in Boston that rents out apartments. Investigators meet with the manager.
Possibly one of your tenants?
I showed him the picture. He said to me, "Trooper, I'm sorry, but I hardly ever see these people. They just mail in their checks."
It looks like another dead end. The police give the phone book another look. Next to the rental company's phone number, someone has written a figure: $275.
So I said to the guy, "Do you have any apartment building or apartments that rent for $275?
The manager tells them the company has only one apartment that rents for that amount. It is currently vacant and being renovated.
So we rushed up there and stopped them from repainting the apartment. Massachusetts State Police got their forensic people in there.
The apartment has been thoroughly cleaned, but investigators find fingerprints in obscure places, on a light bulb, and behind the toilet in the bathroom. The tenant left no forwarding address, according to the building supervisor.
So at that point, the guy said to me, "Well, you ought to talk to his girlfriend."
At 2 o'clock in the morning, police interview the suspect's girlfriend.
Is there any information or anybody that you know?
Although she does not tell investigators who her boyfriend really is, she gives them the name of his stepfather. The next morning, Lieutenant Evans drives to the suburbs outside Boston to question the suspect's stepfather.
I showed him the picture and he said, "What has Dickie done now?" And I said, "Dickie who?" And he said, "Dickie Williams."
called the command post, gave him Richard Charles Williams' name. They ran that name against the fingerprints that we had, and bingo, it was him. So we had the second person identified.
Richard Williams was Thomas Manning's passenger the night Phil Lamanco was murdered. The violent radical is now wanted as a cop killer. Investigators on the case face an extraordinary challenge: finding a group of fugitives who are as elusive as they are dangerous. New England authorities and the FBI join ranks to track down Manning, Levasseur, and Williams. Special Agent Ed Peterson is assigned to assist the New Jersey police in the manhunt.
It was really important, as far as the FBI and all of law enforcement, to put them under a magnifying glass and to look at every possible contact, to try to think like they would think, to try and get into that mindset and to understand, what motivated them and where they would look to go.
The task force sifts through hundreds of hours of intelligence on the Melville-Jackson unit. According to their files, the fugitives have a history of using different aliases to conceal their identities and various mail drops to hide their locations.
We knew that we had a tough job because they did not remain in one place. They didn't do the conventional things that fugitives generally do. They went to such extremes to hide their identities.
In 1981, a man walks into the town clerk's office in Brattleboro, Vermont with an unusual request. He needs a copy of a birth certificate for an infant who died in the early 1950s. The clerk becomes suspicious.
Can you excuse me for a minute?
Brattleboro is a small town, and she knows the infant's family.
How you doing, sir? Do you have any ID on you?
Is there a problem?
No problem, sir. I just need to see your ID.
Get on the ground, but don't do it. Get out now. Get down. Get down. Down. Get out. Get.
Police later identify the man as Raymond Levasseur after finding his fingerprints in an abandoned vehicle nearby. They suspect he was trying to establish a new identity by stealing the birth certificate of a dead infant.
Headed out in the parking lot. It's a white male.
In January 1982, Thomas Manning joins Levasseur on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Authorities turn up the heat on the fugitives. 4 months later, FBI agent John Markey responds to the scene of a bank robbery. Two masked gunmen had stolen $60,000 from a bank in Burlington, Vermont. According to Agent Markey, the precision of the operation points to the Melville-Jackson unit.
All three individuals that went into the bank went in right after an armored car delivery. One man stood in the lobby. The other two vaulted the counter. One of them took the money from the teledraws. The other one took the money that had just been delivered.
The money in the teledrawers was rigged with die packs.
They look like a stack of money. When you take them out of a bank, there's an electronic sensor that causes them to activate. And then within 7 seconds, they go off, letting off tear gas and a red dye, which dyes the money. They threw about $20,000 out the window because it had die packs in it. It was apparent to me that we ought to consider Raymond Levasseur and Thomas Manning and maybe his associate Richard Williams as possible suspects in that bank robbery.
2 months later, 3 men rob a bank in Syracuse, New York, netting $195,000. The MO is nearly identical to the Burlington robbery, but with one exception.
They only took the money that was delivered by the armored car. They did not take any of the money out of the teledraws. That way they eliminated the possible die packs. It was my opinion that we were dealing with the same people who robbed the South Burlington branch, and you could account for the change of not taking money from the teledraws because they would have discussed the die packs.
In just 2 months, over $235,000 has been stolen from area banks. Authorities are concerned that the Melville-Jackson unit is amassing a war chest to finance a new wave of terror. With the threat of more bombings looming, investigators make a difficult decision. They will try to find the terrorists by looking for their children. Pictures of the Manning and Levasseur children are distributed to schools, sport clubs, and pediatricians in the area.
Can you take a look at this and just see if you recognize any of these children?
That was very controversial. We had a lot of conversations as far as distributing the pictures of the children, because the children were innocent in this. They just were living with the parents. They were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids.
Investigators feel they have no choice. The group is deadly, and lives are at stake.
You don't know any of the parents either, do you?
Unfortunately, the gamble does not pay off. The fugitives have hidden their children well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To make matters worse, the gang launches a series of new attacks. On December 16th, police in White Plains, New York, receive a frantic call. An unidentified man has phoned in a bomb threat to a local newspaper. According to the caller, the bomb has been planted in an office building. Fortunately, dozens of employees had evacuated before the building exploded. The blast destroyed nearly every window in the building. Inside, investigators find a communique from a group calling themselves the United Freedom Front. The UFF claims responsibility for the bombing. Agents on the case recognize the UFF's distinctive assault rifle logo.
United Freedom Front.
It is nearly identical to a sketch they found in Manning's safe house.
We actually compared those side by side, and we decided that the logo looked enough, in our opinion, that it was them. We thought that the United Freedom Front, who took credit for that bombing, was in fact the new name for the people involved in the Lamonica killing.
That's not all right.
Over the next year, the UFF claims responsibility for 4 more bombings. On December 14th, 1983, they call the press to issue a chilling statement. They intend to destroy the offices of a national defense contractor in Queens, New York. The caller indicates that a statement from the group can be found in a Manhattan mailbox. The letter denounces U.S. involvement in Central America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. The bomb squad recovers 2 suitcase bombs before they can detonate. Finding an intact bomb is an important break for Special Agent John Markey.
The materials used in that bomb were very similar to the materials used in the Sam Melville, Jonathan Jackson unit bombings in the 70s. The elements of the bomb that was similar was the type of clock used, that the crystal on top of the clock, a hole was melted into the crystal and a brass screw was screwed in to the crystal.
Special Agent Leonard Cross is familiar with the design. He investigated the group's early bombings in the 1970s. In February 1984, Cross becomes the coordinator of the task force hunting the killers. The investigation into the radical group is now in its 8th year. The terrorists have stayed a step ahead of authorities by repeatedly assuming new identities. Agent Cross and the FBI task force decide to take a new approach.
What we tried to do was plot where we knew they had lived, safe houses, where they had bombed, where they had committed bank robberies. So we started putting this all up on a map.
Slowly but surely, a pattern emerges. The group's activities are concentrated in a 4-state area that includes New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Connecticut. In the spring of 1984, the FBI launches Operation Western Sweep, a mission designed to close in on the dangerous fugitives. In 1984, the FBI launches Operation Western Sweep, a mission to apprehend 3 key members of a violent radical group. Agents believe the group has orchestrated numerous acts of domestic terrorism. The New Jersey State Police suspect one of the terrorists also murdered Trooper Phil Lamanco. Hundreds of investigators comb areas where the group is known to operate.
We had the bombing.
As agents uncover the group's safe houses, the FBI deploys SWAT teams to search them. But the fugitives are always one step ahead, according to Detective Richard Ryan.
It was frustrating because we couldn't apprehend them, but we felt as long as they kept committing crimes, they were still out there, they hadn't gone into total hiding, there was a better chance we could catch them.
Agent John Markey tries to predict when the terrorists will strike again. Based on the group's unique lifestyle, he develops an ingenious theory.
There were a series of 4 bank robberies in 1982 and 1983 in upstate New York along Interstate 90 between Syracuse and Albany, New York.
Markey divides the total amount of money stolen by the number of days between robberies. He calculates that the group is operating on a budget of about $737 per day.
Based on that, you could predict when the next robbery would occur. I was predicting that the next robbery would be between June 1st and June 14th of 1984.
Markey's prediction is right on target. On June 9th, the gang hits a bank in Norfolk, Virginia. The ammo is familiar. 3 armed men enter the building. 2 of them jump the counter. They subdue bank personnel at gunpoint. Ignoring the cash in the drawers, they grab bags of money that have just been delivered by an armored car service.
They did not take any of the money out of the teledrawers. That way they eliminated the possible die packs, bait money, and sounding the alarm.
The gang seems to be getting smarter with each new robbery. Investigators need a lead, however small, to break the case wide open. Special Agent Ed Peterson.
We knew no matter how good any fugitive thinks he or she is, no matter how good they think they are, some point and some time, they're going to make a careless mistake.
In the summer of 1984, the fugitives make that crucial mistake. On August 4th, the owner of a storage facility in Binghamton, New York, contacts the FBI. One of his customers hasn't paid his bill in 2 years. The manager opened the storage unit so he could auction off the contents. What he found inside terrified him.
The contents in there included materials on how to make bombs, how to handle firearms training, research on various corporations, and a lot of radical material, and a lot of Marxist-type literature.
Agents find bomb-making diagrams in the storage unit. They show a timer assembled with brass screws. Earlier in the investigation, agents found an unexploded bomb with similar brass screws at one of the group's targets. The bomb is designed to detonate a massive bundle of dynamite with a single electric charge. The distinctive design links Levasseur and his gang to bombings all over the Northeast. There are hundreds of pieces of evidence in the storage unit. Investigators follow up on every clue, no matter how obscure.
The magazines taken out of the storage bin in Binghamton, New York, at first nobody thought they would be of any value.
But an address label on an old seed catalog reveals a new name in the investigation: Jack Horning. Investigators trace the address to Ansonia, Connecticut. According to neighbors, The Horning family moved away years earlier.
The trooper that was assigned to this lead felt, again, we have another dead-end lead. However, he continued to interview people in the neighborhood, and he developed a babysitter who had lived a few houses down, and she babysat for the Horning children.
The teenager remembers the Hornings well. She tells the trooper that Mrs. Horning was a normal mom. The kids were well behaved. The entire time she worked for the Hornings, nothing out of the ordinary happened. But then she remembers one small incident.
One day she was out with Mrs. Horning and they had a motor vehicle accident.
On a hunch, the trooper follows up with the Connecticut Department of Motor Vehicles. He is unable to find an accident report involving a Mrs. Horning. But one report does match the time and location of the incident.
The key was that the babysitter was listed on the accident report as a passenger in that vehicle.
The name the driver gave police at the time was not Horning, but Himes.
This is interesting.
Judy Himes' Connecticut license has since expired. It was traded for a New York license in 1980.
From Connecticut to
Later, the New York license was turned in for an Ohio license. According to DMV records, the Ohio license is still current. Judy Himes' name, along with her address in Columbus, is forwarded to Sergeant Tom Evans.
So I called the Columbus Police Department. Yeah. I said, what is at that address? And the guy said to me, it's a mail drop. And a mail drop meant that's them, that's their MO, that's what they used. They didn't have mail sent to their home.
Okay, right, guys, go.
In Columbus, the FBI rents a vacant house across the street from the mail drop. From there, agents can monitor the facility with video cameras.
The mail drop was a 24/7 operation, so this was going to be difficult to surveil.
On November 3rd, 3.5 weeks into the stakeout, a woman arrives at the mail drop. Investigators visually identify her as the wife of Raymond Levasseur.
It's the first time now in probably over 10 to 12 years that any law enforcement agency had any of these people actually in sight under surveillance. So you can imagine how the adrenaline was pumping.
The fugitive's wife is law enforcement's only link to the terrorists. Rather than making an arrest, agents follow her, hoping she will lead them to her husband. In 1984, the FBI and a multi-state task force trail a group of domestic terrorists. The violent radicals are suspected of a series of bank robberies and bombings. And the murder of a New Jersey State Police trooper. Investigators track the group from a safe house in Connecticut to a mail drop in Columbus, Ohio. After nearly a decade, their only lead to the terrorists' location is the wife of gang leader Ray Levasseur. Agents follow her as she leaves the mail drop. They know that, like the rest of the group, Levasseur's wife is skilled at covering her tracks and at spotting a tail. They're careful to keep their distance, using aerial surveillance as a backup in case she slips away. Detective Richard Ryan.
She was on and off the highway numerous times, stopping, starting, looking around, taking local roads back onto the interstate, back off. So it was a difficult surveillance.
2.5 hours later, the target stops at a house in Deerfield, Ohio.
Once she arrived at the house, a surveillance was set up in the area from different locations as best as they could. And it was a very rural area. There were farmers' fields, cornfields, things of that nature.
New Jersey State Trooper Richard Tao watches the house from a distance.
Approximately 20 minutes later, a male subject left the house and got in his car and left the area.
The male subject is Richard Williams, the man wanted for the murder of New Jersey State Trooper Phillip Lamanco. FBI agents follow Williams to a safe house in Cleveland. They now have 2 houses under surveillance, 60 miles apart.
In one location, we had the suspected murderer of Trooper Phillip Lamonica. In the second location, we had top 10 FBI fugitive Raymond Levasseur. Surveillances continued through the night and into the morning.
Around 9:40 a.m., the Levasseurs leave their house.
All right, fellas. Let me know when you're in position so we can go. Go, 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 go.
The SWAT team moves in. They arrest Ray Levasseur along with his wife.
The call then immediately went out to Ohio, up to Cleveland, that Levasseur was in custody, so now a decision was made to raid the Cleveland, Ohio house.
In Cleveland, agents and police surround the home of Richard Williams. Williams, a suspected murderer and terrorist, gives up without a fight. After years of work, the task force has captured 2 of the group's 3 key men in less than an hour.
We had Ray Levasseur and his wife. We had Dickie Williams. The only remaining fugitives that we had was Tom Manning and his wife.
Agents question Richard Williams about Thomas Manning's location. Williams stalls for hours. With every passing moment, the fugitives have more time to escape.
Where is he?
Finally, Williams breaks down and reveals the addresses of 3 safe houses located in Jefferson, Ohio. One of them belongs to Thomas Manning.
We proceeded to that location and conducted a very extensive search.
Williams' stall tactics have given the Mannings enough time to flee, but not enough time to cover their tracks. Inside their safe house, investigators find handguns, fake IDs, and $32,000 in cash. They also find a 1,000-page record of the group's activities. In one room, agents find a police scanner tuned to a frequency used by the FBI. In another room, they find explosives and bomb-making supplies. They also find a bomb kit that contains distinctive brass screws that match unexploded bombs recovered in 1976 and 1983. They recover a 9mm semi-automatic pistol.
Smith & Wesson.
At the FBI forensics lab, technicians analyze the gun. They compare the bullet that killed Trooper Phillip Lamanco to bullets fired from the 9mm handgun.
We were able to determine that that was the weapon that was used to kill Phil Lamonica.
Although they have finally found the murder weapon, tracing the owner of the gun will be difficult. The serial number has been filed off. Technicians use a chemical solution to raise the number. It is barely legible beneath the surface of the metal. Agents trace the 9mm to a gun shop in Norfolk, Virginia. There it was purchased by a woman named Deborah Ann Fury. Fury had listed an address in Virginia Beach. Investigators check out the location. It turns out to be another mail drop. The surveillance team waits to see who will collect the mail. When a woman arrives and opens the box, agents identify her. Deborah Ann Fury is in reality Thomas Manning's wife. The FBI has finally found a link to the last member of the radical terrorist group. In Ohio, the FBI and police have arrested key members of a violent radical group charged with robbery and domestic terrorism. One of them, Richard Williams, is suspected of killing a police officer. Two of the group's members, Thomas Manning and his wife, are still at large. It has been 5 months since Manning and his family fled their safe house in the rural town of Deerfield. The FBI traces a gun found in the safe house to an address in Virginia Beach, Virginia. As it turns out, the address is another mail drop. After weeks of surveillance, agents spot the fugitive's wife picking up the mail. Special Agent Leonard Cross.
We knew she had a scanner and should be scanning for police radio frequencies as well as FBI frequencies. We had special radios that were all encrypted that could not be picked up. And the surveillance at this point took us north.
Manning's wife leads investigators to a safe house in Norfolk about 20 miles away. They do not want to arrest her until they can be sure her husband is at home. An hour later, investigators follow her to a nearby shopping center.
Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
As an arrest team takes her into custody, a second team moves in on the safe house. Manning is now outside, unaware he's being watched.
We had no weapons. The decision was made so no one would get hurt. This would be the time to make the arrest.
Get out! 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 Don't resist! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Thomas Manning, the last of the terrorists, is arrested in his own backyard. In 1987, Thomas Manning and Richard Williams stand trial in Somerville, New Jersey. Donna Lamonico, the widow of Trooper Phil Lamanco, attends the trial.
It was very important for me to be a part of the trial. I needed to be there. I needed to know exactly what went on. I wanted to make sure they were the two that killed Phil.
The two self-proclaimed revolutionaries are sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Trooper Phillip Lamanco. They receive additional sentences for their roles in a series of bank robberies and bombings starting in 1975. In separate trials, the wife of Thomas Manning is found guilty of conspiracy and sentenced to 15 years. Raymond Levasseur receives 45 years in prison for his role in the group's terrorist activities. His wife is released after spending several months in custody.
I think it's really important to set the record straight that these individuals, Levasseur, Manning, Williams, they were nothing but criminals. These guys want to call themselves as freedom fighters, revolutionaries. At the end of the day, they were criminals. And that's the bottom line. I mean, when you commit bank robberies, when you set off bombs, when you kill a police officer who's only out there doing his job, they were nothing more than criminals.
After the trials, members of the New Jersey State Police visit Phil Lamonico's grave for the very first time.
We went as a group to his gravesite. We felt that we had the respect of Phil. He would know that we had done our best.
2 decades after Phillip Lamonico's death, people still leave flowers and flags on the side of the New Jersey highway he protected.